Stanley Adams. He was found guilty of killing Esther Cook and her daughter Ashley, 12 years old, in their Warren home in 1999. Adams committed the act during a break-in because he knew the victims. His execution has been postponed several times. Nawaz Ahmed. The state of Ohio sentenced Ahmed to death for killing his estranged wife's family. He murdered Dr. Lubaina Bhatti, 39, her father, Abdul Majid Bhatti, 78, her sister, Ruhi Ahmed, 35, and her niece Nasira Ahmed, 2 years old. David Allen. In January 1991, he was found guilty of killing 84-year-old Chloe English by stabbing, beating, and strangling her. English's involvement in a ministry program allowed him to make friends with her while he was incarcerated. English's thumbprint was discovered on the inside of one of his glasses lenses. Allen's preferred Doral cigarette butt and the saliva type that matched Allen's were discovered in English's garbage can. Anthony Apanovich. He was found guilty of the 1984 essay and murder of Mary Ann Flynn, who was discovered dead in her home after failing to report for work as a nurse at Cleveland General Hospital. Abdul Aukal. During a divorce and child custody battle in 1992, Aukal shot and killed his estranged wife and her brother Latif and Mahmoud Abdul Aziz inside the old Lakeside courthouse. Richard Bays. Because he killed an elderly man in a wheelchair so he could steal his money and use it to purchase cocaine, Richard Bays received the capital punishment. Richard Beasley. He lured 3 men using a Craigslist ad for a non-existent job and shot them in the back in 2011. His accomplice, Brogan Rafferty, was sentenced to life in prison. Anthony Belton. In 2009, Belton was convicted of shooting and killing Matthew Dugan, a 34-year-old gas station clerk. Belton and 2 other men participated in the robbery and subsequent shooting death at a BP petrol station on August 13, 2008. Robert Bethel. After being found guilty in the June 26, 1996 murders of 18-year-old James Reynolds and his girlfriend, 14-year-old Shannon Hawks, Bethel was given the death penalty in 2003. Court documents state that Reynolds was accused of testifying against a fellow gang member by Bethel, a member of the Southside Mafia Crips group. Reynolds and Hawks were lured to a field by Bethel and another man. Hawks was shot 4 times and Reynolds was shot 10 times. Due to his age of 17 at the time of the shooting, the other individual was not eligible for the death penalty. He was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole for 63 years. The appeals procedure is currently ongoing in Bethel's case. Melvin Bonnell. In 1986, Bonnell was found guilty of shooting and killing Robert Bunner, then 23 years old, in Bunner's apartment. Blood on Bonnell's jacket was found to have come from the victim in 2009, according to the results of DNA testing. Grady Brinkley. After being found guilty of the heinous murder of his ex-girlfriend, Shantae Smith, 18, Brinkley was given the death penalty. Smith released Brinkley from jail after he was arrested for punching a woman during a heist. Brinkley informed another prisoner that he intended to kill Smith and head to Chicago. Smith was left to bleed to death on the floor of her apartment on January 7, 2000, after Brinkley cut her throat and strangled her. He stole her ATM card to contact the nearby Greyhound bus stop. Brinkley attempted to use Smith's ATM card 16 times before boarding a bus, but was unsuccessful because he didn't have the PIN number. Brinkley was seen on camera wearing Smith's coat, which was noticeably too small for him. George Brinkman. He went on a murderous rampage in 2017 and killed 5 people. He had been friends with Suzanne Taylor since elementary school and her 2 daughters, Taylor Pfeiffer, 21, and Kylie Pfeiffer, 18. Brinkman captured the women inside their North Royalton, Ohio home on June 10, 2017. Before killing her daughters, he murdered Suzanne in front of them. Brinkman then visited the residence of Rogel Jean John, 71, and his wife Roberta Bobby John, 64, in Lake Township, Ohio. Brinkman shot the pair to death after knowing them for more than a decade. Quizzy Bryan. He was found guilty of killing Cleveland policeman Wayne Leon in 2000 as he was stopped for a traffic violation. Bryan is scheduled to be put to death on January 7, 2026. Sean Carter. He was convicted of essaying and killing Vader Prince, his adoptive grandmother, who was 68, in her Southington home in 1997. Judge Sean O'Brien of the Trumbull County Common Pleas Court declared in August that Carter was not mentally competent to be put to death. He's gonna go through another competence hearing in August 2026. James Conway. Conway was given 2 different death sentences in 2003 for killing people in 2001 and 2002. According to court documents, Conway killed 21-year-old Andrew Dotson in Prairie Township by stabbing him in September 2001 because he was afraid Dotson would inform authorities about Conway's role in another shooting. When 2 other people were unable to complete the shot, Conway brought Dotson to him. Conway then led Dotson to a field and used a pickaxe to stab him in the chest. Conway later tried to hire a prisoner to murder one of the 2 individuals he had first requested to kill Dotson. Conway shot 25-year-old Jason Gervais and tried to murder another man outside a strip club in January 2002. Conway took a gun out of his car and started shooting after his brother claimed the surviving victim had stabbed him. Conway later admitted to a cellmate that he didn't regret killing Gervais. The appeal of Conway's case is still ongoing. John Drummond. Drummond Jr., who was 26 at the time, was given a death sentence for the murder of Gian Dent Jr., a 3-month-old boy who was sitting in a baby swing in the living room of his family's house on Rutledge Drive in the East Side when 10 rounds were fired into the house from across the street. Christopher Garrett. In September 2019, Garrett became the latest prisoner from Franklin County to be sentenced to death. On January 5, 2018, Garrett's ex-girlfriend, Nicole Duxon, 34, and their 4-year-old daughter, Christina Duxon, were discovered stabbed in Duxon's backyard by Columbus police. Nicole had been stabbed over 40 times as a result of a child support dispute. After witnessing Garrett murder her mother, Christina had been stabbed over 30 times. According to prosecution documents, Garrett informed officers that he went after Christina after she ran while yelling. Currently, Garrett's case is being appealed. Sean Great. For killing 5 young women in and around northern Ohio between 2006 and 2016, he received a death sentence. On May 7, 2018, Great was found guilty on 2 charges of aggravated murder in Ashland County. On March 1, 2019, he entered a guilty plea to 2 further murders in Richland County, and on September 11, 2019, he entered a guilty plea to a 3rd murder in Marion County. Scott Group. In addition to killing Robert Lozier, the proprietor of Youngstown Downtown Bar, he also shot his wife Sandra, who subsequently testified against Group during his trial. Group shot both of them in the head after forcing the couple into the bar restroom, but Sandra lived. Additionally, he stole $1,200 in cash. Warren Hennes. In 1994, a jury recommended that Hennes be executed for the shooting death of 51-year-old Richard Myers in March 1992. Myers had been attempting to assist Hennes in locating drug treatment and therapy for a Hennes family member. Hennes shot Myers 5 times after Myers picked him up on the day of the murder. He also took his car, checks, and credit cards and used the money he got from the robbery to purchase drugs. Governor Mike DeWine granted Hennes a reprieve despite the fact that he had multiple planned execution dates, the most recent being December 17, 2024. The new date for Hennes's execution is December 15, 2027. Danny Hill. In 1985, he was found guilty of essaying and killing Raymond Fife, then 12 years old, in Warren. After being severely injured in an attack while riding his bicycle, Raymond passed away 2 days later. Only Hill, who was 18 at the time of the murder, received the death penalty, despite being one of 2 men found guilty in Raymond Fife's murder. Timothy Combs, Hill's accomplice, was given a life sentence because he was only 17 at the time of the murder and could not have been sentenced to death. Since then, Combs passed away in prison in 2018. Hill's execution date is set for July 22, 2026. Lance Hundley. He was found guilty of killing Erica Huff, a 41-year-old disabled lady, and trying to kill Denise Johnson, her mother, at their Southside home on Cleveland Street. Hundley was living with Huff, who had a child with Hundley's brother, Kareem Jackson. In 1998, Jackson was given the death penalty for the double murder of 19-year-old Antonio Hunter and 23-year-old Terrence Walker at an apartment in Clinton Township on March 25, 1997. Jackson went to rob the males while they were dealing drugs. He and the other robbers took out a cell phone, a little bit of Mary Jane, and $45. Court documents state that Jackson shot the guys after they recognized him and placed a couch cushion over their heads. 3 co-defendants who received 10 to 15-year sentences for their involvement have all been freed from prison. Jackson's execution date is presently scheduled for December 2025. Though he had previously been set for execution, he has been granted reprieves, most recently in 2022. Nathaniel Jackson. Jackson and Donna Roberts were found guilty of killing her ex-husband, Robert Fingerhut, in Howland in 2001. The goal was to get the money from life insurance. Due to pending legal actions, Jackson's execution date has not been set. Anthony Kirkland. Between 2006 and 2009, he essayed, strangled, and burned the bodies of 4 women. Kirkland previously served 16 years in prison for killing his lover by assaulting, strangling, and burning her. In addition to 2 sentences of 70 years to life, he was also given 2 death sentences. Michael Madison. When police responded to complaints of a bad smell on July 19, 2013, they found a woman's decaying body inside the garage that Madison had rented. 2 more bodies were discovered in the area the following day, one in a vacant house's basement and the other in a backyard. They were all in plastic bags. Police discovered further evidence of decomposition in Madison's flat after securing a search warrant. Madison was brought into custody without incident following a brief confrontation with police at his mother's home. The victims were 28-year-old Shatisha Shealy, who went missing in September 2012. In June 2013, 38-year-old Cleveland resident Angela Deskins went missing. On July 10, 2013, 18-year-old Sherelda Ellen Terry was last seen leaving Cleveland Elementary School, where she worked as a summer employee. David Martin. Martin was given the death penalty for killing Jeremy Cole during a robbery in Warren in 2012. During the incident, Martin also shot and wounded a female victim. Due to pending appeals, his execution date has not yet been set. Gregory McKnight. From May to November 2000, he killed 2 people and concealed their bodies on his property in Vinton County, Ohio. This came after he was released from prison for the 1992 murder of a man in Columbus when he was just a teenager. Jonathan Monroe. In 2002, Monroe was sentenced to death for the murders of DeCarla Quincy, 33, and Trevina Simmons, 31. According to court documents, Monroe believed Quincy had access to a lot of money and drugs, so he and an accomplice went to Quincy's flat. Monroe tormented the 2 women and made the accomplice tie them up before shooting them in the head and slitting their throats. Currently, Monroe's case is being appealed. In addition, he has a life sentence for a 1999 murder. Austin Myers. Myers became the youngest inmate on death row in Ohio at the time of his sentence. He orchestrated the murder of 18-year-old Justin Back in order to steal a safe from his house. Myers and Back had attended the same middle school together and were childhood friends. I'm gonna do a separate video regarding this case. Jason Robb. Robb's involvement in a riot at the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility earned him a death sentence in 1995. Due to the possible dispute in Scioto County, Robb's case was transferred to Franklin County. A gang of prisoners had rioted at the Lucasville prison in 1993. Court documents revealed that Robb, the head of the jail's Aryan Brotherhood gang, and 2 other prisoners ordered other inmates to strangle state prison guard Robert Vallandigham, 40, during the incident. Robb organized for fellow inmate David Summers, 31, to be fatally stabbed, strangled, and beaten 6 days later. At the time of the assault, Robb was incarcerated for voluntary manslaughter. The death penalty was applied to 4 other prisoners who were engaged in the killings. All 5 men's cases are still being appealed. William Sapp. In 1992 and 1993, he killed 3 women and girls in Springfield, Ohio. He also attempted to kill another woman, and he may have killed a 4th in Florida. Sapp had served time in prison for a previous essay before being arrested for the killings in 1996. He essayed and murdered 11-year-old Martha Leach and 12-year-old Free Morrow in 1992. 1 year later, he murdered 31-year-old Belinda Anderson. Raymond Twyford. He and an accomplice, Daniel Eichelberry, killed Richard Franks, 37, in Jefferson County, Ohio, in the fall of 1992. A 13-year-old girl and an 18-year-old female were allegedly essayed by Franks. The girls were the daughters of Twyford's girlfriend. Franks was shot multiple times in the head, and his hands were cut off to prevent police from identifying the body. Warren Wadey. Several years after Ohio's death punishment was reinstated in 1981, Wadey was given a death sentence in 1987. He stormed into Paula Mason's apartment on July 18, 1986, tied her up, beat her, and then strangled her with a jump rope. Mason was 22 at the time. According to court documents, Wadey then took Mason's car and credit cards. In addition, he was found guilty of multiple other essays and break-ins. The case of Wadey is being appealed. Christopher Whitaker. Whitaker abducted, essayed, tortured, and killed 14-year-old Aliana DeFries from Cleveland, Ohio, on January 26, 2017. After taking DeFries to an abandoned house, Whitaker, who had a criminal background that included grand theft, burglary, aggravated robbery, felonious assault, and others, essayed her. A hammer, a screwdriver, a nut driver, a box cutter, and a drill were used to beat and stab her to death. Willie Wilkes. He killed Aurora Wilkins and attempted to kill Alexander Morales Jr. Wilkins was sitting on the front porch of a Park Avenue home on the north side. Morales was holding her baby when Wilkes approached the porch and asked where he could find Wilkins's brother. Morales stated that as he turned to go inside the house, Wilkes shot him. Wilkins tried to grab the baby, and Wilkes shot her once in the head, killing her. Andre Williams. In 1989, Williams received a death sentence for the home invasion that killed George Melnick, 65, of Warren, as well as for the attempted essay, beating, and causing the loss of vision of Melnick's wife, Catherine. James Worley. In Delta, Ohio, Sierra Joggin was kidnapped and killed. 3 days after going missing on July 19, 2016, she was discovered dead. James Dean Worley, her attacker, was found guilty and given a death sentence for the murder and more than 20 years in prison for the assault, kidnapping, and other offenses. At the time of Joggins's murder, Worley was not included in any state or federal offender databases and had previously been found guilty and imprisoned for the attack and attempted kidnapping of another lady under remarkably identical circumstances. However, he was released after 3 years. Robert Williams, Jr. On what appeared to be a typical fall day, Deborah Blaine, a 24-year-old waitress and mother of 2, reported to work at Stone Gables Tavern, a small rural pub in northern Trumbull County, at 6 p.m. on November 7, 1988. She arrived at work and waited on a few clients after her boss left at around 7 p.m. Deborah Blaine and her hardly acquainted customer Robert Williams were the only 2 people remaining in the establishment by around 8 p.m. Blaine slapped him and broke his glasses after Williams requested her to give him a titty shot and verbally and sexually assaulted her. After ordering a shrimp dinner and leaving the pub, Williams, now furious, walked home and grabbed a handgun. His shrimp meal was ready when he got back to the pub, but Williams claims it was burned. Following a dispute or altercation, Williams shot the victim twice, once in the back of her body and once in the back of her head. He stopped her as Blaine tried to go to the phone by the kitchen. After getting a knife from the kitchen, he cut her throat. He further claims that he unzipped her pants and raised her blouse, touching her breasts during his bloodletting. Blaine stopped breathing when Williams stood on her throat. Blaine pleaded not to be killed, saying she had 2 small babies. Jeffrey Wagenstall. He killed a girl he kidnapped from her bedroom. Amber Garrett, 10 years old, lived in Harrison, but her body was discovered in a wooded slope in Indiana, 4 miles away. The location of her actual murder has never been established. A drop of blood in his car that matched Amber's DNA was one of the pieces of evidence used against him. In addition, a strand of his hair was discovered lodged in the girl's underwear. He was also spotted by witnesses close to where her remains were discovered. Amber was beaten with a blunt object and stabbed 11 times. Hersey Wesson. In the 2008 stabbing death of Emil Varhola, 81, and the attempted murder of Varhola's wife, he was found guilty of aggravated murder and other related offenses. In addition, he was convicted of murder while committing a violent crime and aggravated robbery. Dwayne Short. For the aggravated killings of his wife, Rhonda Short, and her friend, Donnie Sweeney, Dwayne Allen Short received a death sentence in Ohio. The Ohio Supreme Court upheld his conviction and death sentence. Short had maintained that his counsel was incompetent and that his voluntary and unknowing withdrawal of the right to offer mitigating evidence was not intentional. However, the court dismissed these objections. Gurpreet Singh. Singh killed his wife, Shalinderjit Kaur, 39, her aunt, Amarjit Kaur, 58, and her parents, Parmjit Kaur, 62, and Hakyakat Singh Panag, 59. The lakefront at Westchester Condominium Complex on Wintreat Drive was the scene of the incident on the evening of April 28, 2019. Prosecutors said that Singh's financial difficulties and the romantic involvement with an out-of-state woman may have been the driving forces for the killings. George Skatzes. Skatzes was viewed by prosecutors as a leader of the 1993 11-day rebellion at the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility in Lucasville, which resulted in the deaths of 9 prisoners and corrections officer Robert Vallandigham. Skatzes was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole for the murder of the officer and a death sentence for the murders of inmates Earl Elder and David Summers. Skatzes was already serving a life sentence for a 1983 conviction for aggravated murder. He was found guilty of kidnapping the 3 as well. Kenneth Smith. Ruth and Lewis Ray were robbed and killed in their Hamilton home in May 1995 by Smith and his brother Randy. They lived next door. Ruth Ray was a registered nurse and Lewis Ray worked as a flea market vendor. Only one brother, Kenneth Wayne Smith, was condemned to death, despite the fact that both Smiths were found guilty of murder with the death penalty specified. After nearly decapitating Lewis Ray with a knife, Kenneth Smith flipped him over and removed his money from his back pocket. Randy was instructed by Kenneth to kill Mrs. Ray via strangulation. Following the murders, they wrecked the residence and then covered their hands with socks to conceal their crime. Dawood Spaulding. He was found guilty of the murders of Erica Singleton, the mother of his children, and Ernest Thomas, her boyfriend. Additionally, he shot Patrick Griffin, Thomas's nephew, in the neck, paralyzing him from the waist down. Singleton and Thomas were shot in the back of the head, and their bodies were discovered by police close to their vehicles. John Stojets. He was found guilty of killing 17-year-old D'Amico Watkins by stabbing him to death on April 25, 1996, at Madison Correctional Institution in what police described as a racially motivated murder. Stojets was white while the victim was black. John Stumpf. He shot Mary Jane Stout during a failed robbery attempt at the house where she and her husband, Norman Stout, lived. Stumpf also shot Norman Stout. Mary Jane died on May 14, 1984, at home after being shot 3 times. James Tench. He was found guilty of beating his 55-year-old mother, Mary Tench, to death on November 11, 2013, in order to prevent her from reporting to the authorities that he was robbing her of her money. On November 12, 2013, her body was discovered inside her vehicle, parked in an industrial park off of CarQuest Drive in Brunswick. Investigators thought the woman had been hit by a car before her body was placed in the back of her SUV. She had sustained at least 18 strikes to her skull. Ashford Thompson. For the July 2008 shooting death of Twinsburg police officer Joshua McTerrian, he received a death sentence in 2010. While conducting a traffic stop near Route 91 and Glenwood, Officer McTerrian, 33, was shot 4 times in the head, resulting in his death. James Trimble. On January 21, 2005, Trimble shot and killed his girlfriend, Renee Bauer, 42, and her son, Dakota Bauer, 7. The victims lived in the house they shared on Sandy Lake Road. An AR-15 semi-automatic weapon was used to shoot Renee Bauer 13 times. Dakota Bauer was hit by 6 of the rounds that went through her. Trimble was upset that Renee had packed a bag and was probably leaving, according to the authorities. After arming himself with more weapons and ammo, Trimble fled the house and held a neighbor at gunpoint while firing rounds at responding police officers for many hours. Then, he broke into the residence of 22-year-old Sarah Positano, who was a student at Kent State University, in a duplex on Ranfield Road. As a SWAT team encircled the house during a hostage standoff, Trimble killed Positano by shooting her once in the neck while she was speaking with a police dispatcher. Later, Trimble, who was hiding in Positano's room, was taken into custody by the SWAT team after they broke into the house. Donna Roberts. In 2003, she was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and involvement in aggravated murder. Roberts was having an affair with Nathaniel Jackson. In letters and phone conversations while incarcerated for another offense, Jackson threatened to kill her ex-husband Robert Fingerhut, which he did on December 11, 2001, in the home that Fingerhut and Roberts shared. According to Jackson, Roberts was unaware of his intended plans. Jackson's involvement in the crime earned him a death sentence as well. Investigators claimed that in addition to correspondence and phone conversations between Roberts and Jackson, Roberts purchased gloves and a mask for Jackson to use during the murder and even granted him entry into the house where the murder took place. She is the only woman on Ohio's death row. Carlos Sanders. He was convicted of aggravated murder during a 1993 prison riot that left 9 people dead, including a corrections officer. Lee Moore. The state of Ohio sentenced Moore to death for a robbery murder. Court documents indicate that Melvin Ollinger was kidnapped by Lee Moore, who then pushed him into a car's trunk while brandishing a gun. After being driven to a remote location, the victim was robbed and shot dead. Samuel Moreland. For the 1985 Dayton murders of his girlfriend, Glenna Green, 46, her daughter Lana Green, 23, and 3 of Glenna Green's grandkids, Datrin Talbot, 7, Daquan Talbot, 6, and Violana Green, 6, Moreland was found guilty and given the death penalty. Frederick Mund. Misty Hendrickson, Brittany's mother, and her 3 kids resided with Mund in Lebanon, a town of roughly 200 people, located about 80 miles southeast of Columbus. She admitted to officials that she played bingo and was used to leaving the kids with Mund. At first, he said that Brittany, then 7 years old, had strayed off while he was sleeping. Mund actually had essayed Brittany and considered taking her to a hospital. Instead, he stopped her in the well a mile away and threw rocks at her until she stopped crying. Brittany drowned in the well and had her skull broken from the beating. The coroner also found evidence of past essay and past physical abuse. Freddie McNeil. He was found guilty of Blake Fulton's aggravated murder on May 13, 1994. Fulton and Ruchinsky were using crack cocaine and drinking alcohol when they ran out of drugs. They were searching for additional drugs when they came into McNeil, who offered to sell them crack cocaine for $20. McNeil pulled out a gun and demanded the money after Fulton refused to show it to him. After halting the vehicle, Fulton told McNeil to get out. McNeil left with the car keys, but he came back a little while later, put the gun to Fulton's head, pulled the trigger, and murdered him. Charles Maxwell. On November 27, 2005, he murdered Nicole McCorkle, his former partner, while their 3-year-old daughter watched in horror. A few days prior, McCorkle had testified before a grand jury and police that Maxwell had beaten her until she was hospitalized and rendered unconscious. McCorkle's sister, Loretta Kenny, had arrived to McCorkle's house to try to protect her from his anger when 40-year-old Maxwell opened fire on her. As their daughter watched, on the eve of her 4th birthday, Maxwell pivoted and shot his girlfriend of 6 years in the face, but that round went wild. Maxwell killed McCorkle with a direct shot behind her ear when she twitched. James Mamone. He was given a death sentence for the murders of his former mother-in-law and 2 small children. The 3 killings happened in the Canton region in 2009. Mamone killed his 57-year-old ex-mother-in-law, Margaret Eakin, and stabbed his 2 children, 3-year-old son James and 5-year-old daughter Macy, as they were buckled up in their car seats. Mamone claimed that the crimes were retaliation for his divorce and that he was trying to prevent the children from growing up in a dysfunctional household. Thomas Snuff. In 2017, he attempted to pay a man to burn his 2 housemates' bodies after fatally stabbing them. After jurors found Snuff guilty and recommended his execution for the killings of Regina Capobianco, 50, and John Mann, 65, he was sentenced to death in 2019. Nuff's claims that he entered the room while Capobianco was fatally stabbing Mann and that he stabbed her in self-defense when she turned the knife on him were unanimously rejected by the justices. Defense attorneys said Parma Heights police ruined the investigation, which should have shown Nuff was innocent. Keith Lamar. He was found guilty of helping to kill 5 prisoners in the early hours of the 1993 rebellion at Lucasville prison, which lasted for 11 days. Since he was 19, Lamar had been incarcerated. He was a dealer in Cleveland at the time of the crack epidemic. He once killed a childhood friend who was an addict when the man broke into his apartment to rob him. Lawrence Landrum. Since 1986, Landrum has been on death row for killing Harold White while breaking into White's house. Stanley Jalowick. He was sent to death row because he allegedly helped kill police informer Ronald Lally. Audrey Jones. Since 1998, he has been incarcerated at Chillicothe Prison on death row. He was convicted by a jury in the shooting death of Ashtabula police officer William D. Glover Jr. on November 17, 1997, after he was shot twice in the head and once in the shoulder. According to testimony given during the trial, Jones rushed over and kicked Glover in the chest as he collapsed to the ground. Philip Jones. On April 23, 2007, Jones killed and essayed 33-year-old Susan Marie Christian Yates in Mount Peace Cemetery. She had a plastic cross over her right eye when a jogger discovered her body in front of a cemetery. Her entire body was bruised and she had strangling injuries to her neck. Jones gave his wife a similar crucifix in 2006 after becoming an ordained priest while incarcerated for a previous essay. Juan Kinley. He was found guilty in 1991 of aggravated murder for the killings of his ex-girlfriend and her son. A 3-judge panel sentenced him to death, and the Ohio 2nd District Court of Appeals upheld his conviction. Percy Hutton. He was found guilty of killing Derek Ricky Mitchell, 24, on September 16, 1985, in Cleveland, Ohio. Before Percy Hutton began to suspect that Derek Mitchell and Samuel Simmons had stolen from him, the men were close friends. Hutton visited Samuels's house on Friday, September 13 or Saturday, September 14, 1985, and questioned him regarding a stolen sewing machine. After several discussions, Hutton shot both Mitchell and Simmons. Mitchell's body was discovered on September 13, 1985. Simmons survived the shooting. Cleveland Jackson. He was found guilty of killing 3-year-old Julia Grant and 17-year-old Lanisha Williams in a robbery that took place in Lima, Ohio, on January 3, 2000. Cleveland Jackson and his half-brother, Jeronique Cunningham, made the decision to rob Shane Lyles's apartment on January 3. In order to talk about a drug deal in the apartment complex's stairwell, Jackson lured Shane outside the unit. Cunningham remained in the flat with Lanisha Williams and 2 other teenagers watching TV. After getting up, Cunningham told the 3 teenagers to go into the kitchen. He had a revolver on him and used it to hit one of the youngsters in the jaw when they did not immediately cooperate. Then Jackson commanded Shane to enter the residence while brandishing a gun. Jackson pushed Shane back into the kitchen where the 3 teens were, along with 4 other people, including the 3-year-old, after robbing Shane and his apartment of cash and drugs. Jackson shot Shane in the back after Shane claimed to have given him everything he had. Cunningham and Jackson started shooting at everyone in the kitchen. Until they ran out of ammunition, they kept shooting. Then they ran away. At least 1 shot was fired at each person in the kitchen. They killed the 3-year-old and Lanisha Williams. Both Jackson and Cunningham received separate death sentences. Jackson was named as the mastermind by Cunningham at his trial. Jeremiah Jackson. Jeremiah Jackson entered the 24-hour coin laundry where Tracy Pickrell was working the overnight shift brandishing a gun. He took her necklace and $50. He shot her in the head when she jerked back as he reached for her bracelet. The 38-year-old Cleveland woman passed away. Jackson was found guilty of numerous additional offenses, such as felonious assault, kidnapping, aggravated robbery, and attempted murder. He shot and wounded a friend on June 2, 2009, which sparked his violent crime spree. He robbed the Walgreens on Leavitt Road in Lorain, 2 pubs in the Cleveland region, a coin laundry on East 63rd Street and Fleet Avenue, and the Howard Johnson Hotel across from Cedar Point on Sandusky, which he used as his hiding place. When he killed Pickrell on June 18, his rampage came to a stop. Timothy Hoffner. He was found guilty of killing Christopher Hammer, 22, on September 22, 1993, in Toledo, Ohio. Christopher Hammer made friends with Timothy Hoffner and Archie Dixon during the summer of 1993. Christopher briefly resided with Dixon, Hoffner, and Dixon's girlfriend, Kirsten Wilkerson. Early in September 1993, Dixon and Hoffner took a third friend to the movies in Christopher's car. The friend heard Dixon and Hoffner talking about what to do with Christopher's vehicle and potential storage options while on the trip. Later, at a second-hand auto dealership, the friend would recognize Christopher's vehicle. Dixon informed his fiancée on September 21, 1993, that he and Hoffner were planning to get Chris. After meeting Dixon and Hoffner at a pool hall later that evening, Wilkerson deduced that they intended to murder Christopher. Early on September 22, 1993, the three made their way back to Wilkerson's home. Christopher was brutally beaten by Dixon and Hoffner when they attacked him at the house. Hoffner unsuccessfully attempted to break Christopher's neck and restrained him in a headlock, while Dixon beat Christopher over the head with a wine bottle. Christopher pleaded with both men to halt. While Dixon searched Christopher's wallet and took $11 in cash, as well as Christopher's birth certificate and social security card, he bound Christopher to a bunk bed ladder. Dixon and Hoffner left the house to go dig a grave. Wilkerson, Dixon, Hoffner, and Christopher all climbed into Christopher's vehicle and went to the location of the grave's excavation. Christopher was permitted to enjoy a final cigarette while Wilkerson remained in the car, and the three guys strolled to the burial. After that, Christopher was forced into the grave, gagged, blindfolded, and had his wrists and feet bound behind his back. Dixon and Hoffner smothered him with dirt while holding him down. The two men then walked over the grave multiple times, packing down the soil after fully burying Christopher. Dixon and Hoffner were both arrested, charged, and convicted, and sentenced to death for their parts in Christopher's murder. Wilkerson was convicted of kidnapping and sentenced to 25 years in prison. All this was for them to be able to sell Christopher's car. Gary Eubanks. William and Juanita Lehman went back to their house in Springfield Township, Hamilton County, Ohio, at approximately 9 p.m. on May 13, 1987. Once inside, William Lehman faced a burglar who then used the knife to murder Juanita, 53, and William, 55. These killings remained unsolved for a decade. Gary's father, Gary Eubanks Sr., and brother, Larry Eubanks, told police in August 1997 that Gary Eubanks had killed the Lehmans. On the evening of May 13, 1987, Eubanks had gone to the Lehman residence in order to commit burglary. He entered by a back window after checking to make sure no one was home. Williams's jewelry and wallet were taken from the dresser in the main bedroom by Eubanks. When the Lehmans entered the house, Eubanks was challenged by William in a bedroom. He then used the knife to assault William, repeatedly stabbing him before slitting his throat. He confessed that the attack ended in a matter of seconds. He chased Juanita into the living area, seized her, and slit her throat as well. Eubanks left a bloodied hand towel in the sink after washing in the restroom. After leaving the house through the back door, he went into the neighboring woods through the backyard and then followed a creek to a local school. By the time police came, Eubanks had left. Juanita crawled out of the front door after being attacked. She somehow made her way from the patio to the driveway, then down the driveway, before fainting close to the street while heavily bleeding. Police officer Pat Kemper was operating his patrol car at around 9:25 p.m. that night when he noticed a woman lying on the driveway at the Lehmans' house, waving her arms slowly to attract attention. The person was covered in blood. Although Juanita was conscious, blood began to flow from her throat as she tried to speak to the officer about who attacked her. Juanita passed away in the hospital from her wounds. Williams's body was found in the master bedroom. Delano Hale. On June 21, 2004, Euclid resident Green, 46, went to the Lake Erie Lodge to audition Hale, a former prisoner whom Green had heard singing on the street. Hale took Green's car and credit cards and shot him 4 times in the head. He claimed he used the victim's own gun in self-defense, but he did not testify during the trial. He said that because Green continued to move after being shot, he fired 4 times. However, according to a coroner, Green would have died just after 2 shots. After purchasing cleaning supplies and trash bags with the credit card, Hale pulled Green's packed body through a wall opening into a nearby storage room and left it there. 2 days later, the body was discovered by hotel staff. Gerald Hand. Gerald is found guilty of killing Jill Hand, 58, and Walter Lonnie Welch, 55, in Delaware County, Ohio, on January 15, 2002. Gerald was the owner of a Columbus, Ohio radiator shop. He occasionally employed Walter Lonnie Welch at the shop. Gerald had a number of additional workers as well. In March 1976, Gerald Hand's first wife, Donna, was killed. In the basement of the house she and Gerald shared, Donna was discovered dead from strangulation. There was no sign of forced entry, but the house was ransacked. There were no reported thefts from the residence. Gerald earned $50,000 from the Ohio Court of Claims Victims Compensation Fund, plus a settlement from his life insurance after Donna passed away. A year later, Gerald married Lori, his second wife. They had a son, Robert Jr., together. They lived in the same house where Donna was killed. On September 9, 1979, Lori was killed also. Her top was pushed up and her pants were loose when her body was discovered in the basement. She had also died from strangulation. Although the house had been partially robbed, nothing was reported missing, and Lori's car had been stolen from the garage. After she passed away, Gerald received multiple life insurance benefits. Gerald was looked into as a potential suspect in both killings by the police, but their murders were never solved. Gerald married Glenna Castle, his third wife. Before getting a divorce, they were married for 7 or 8 years. Gerald wed Jill, his fourth wife, in October 1992. His radiator shop was collapsing by 2000 and he owed more than $218,000. Tension arose between Gerald and Jill as a result of the financial difficulties, particularly after Jill learned that some of the debt was in her name. After selling his store, Gerald started earning minimum wage as a security guard. Walter Welch started approaching his older brother in the middle of 2001 to ask if he might borrow his weapon. Additionally, Welch revealed to his brother that he had murdered Gerald's first wife and that he and Gerald had plotted Jill's murder. In the weeks that followed, Welch kept asking his brother about the weapon. Welch discussed the intended murder and his intentions with the money Gerald had promised him with others. After work on January 15, 2002, Gerald came home. He called the police 30 minutes later to report that an intruder had shot his wife and that he had shot the intruder. When the police came, they found Jill between the kitchen and the living room. She suffered many gunshot wounds. Gerald reported to the police that he heard his wife scream and then 2 gunshots while he was in the restroom. He claimed he did not identify the intruder, so he hurried to the bedroom to get his revolvers and started shooting at the intruder. Gerald followed the intruder as he ran away, shooting until the invader fell on the neighbors' driveway. He said he believed the car belonged to Welch, a former employee, but he did not recognize the masked invader. Police learned about Gerald's financial difficulties and the hefty rewards he would get in the event that Jill died during the investigation. Gerald and Welch were also linked by the police. Evidence from the community suggests that Welch was attempting to collect further money from Gerald for Jill's death. Gerald chose to murder Welch in retaliation, claiming it was self-defense. Gerald was taken into custody, charged with Jill's murder, and found guilty of killing Welch as well. For each murder, he received a death sentence. James Hanna. He used a padlock in a shock and a homemade knife to murder his cellmate. Hanna boasted that he beat his 43-year-old cellmate Peter Kopas for 2 hours after stabbing him in the eye with a modified paintbrush, causing him to struggle pretty good. At Lebanon Correctional Institution in 1997, Hanna killed Kopas, who was serving a sentence for the corruption of a juvenile, while he was serving a life sentence for the murder of a convenience store employee. James Goff. In 1994, he was convicted of the murder of an 88-year-old Bible school teacher. Goff killed Myrtle Rutledge, who was found dead by her daughter in her home near Wilmington. A jury found him guilty of robbing and stabbing Rutledge after 3 hours of deliberation. She received 12 stab wounds. The day after bringing furnishing to Rutledge's house, Goff, a crack addict, robbed her. He committed the crime at the age of 19, and he was 20 when he received his punishment. Philip Elmore. Elmore was convicted by a jury of aggravated murder for killing his ex-girlfriend in June 2002. He broke into the Newark house of 47-year-old Pamela Anna Reno and waited for her while she was at her son's wedding. When Anna Reno returned, Elmore killed her by hitting her in the head with a pipe and strangling her. Sean Ford. He was found guilty of killing his girlfriend's parents with a sledgehammer in 2013. At the time of the killings, Ford was 18. In April 2013, New Franklin residents Jeffrey and Margaret Peggy Schobert were brutally murdered. Jamal Vaughn, who was 14 at the time and received a life sentence, was Ford's accomplice. To get to the Schobert's house in New Franklin, the teenagers had to walk 8 miles from Akron. Ford had attacked Chelsea Schobert with a knife a few days prior, leaving her critically injured at the time of the incident. According to the prosecution, Ford killed the Schoberts because they intended to break up him and their daughter. Antonio Franklin. He was found guilty and given the death penalty for killing his uncle, Anthony Franklin, and his grandparents, Ivory and Ophelia Franklin, in Dayton, Ohio, on April 18, 1997. Antonio moved in with his grandparents and uncle when he was a teenager. Antonio started to change when he was 17 years old. He said he was afraid he would be kidnapped by aliens. Antonio arrived at his girlfriend's house in the midst of a winter night, looking dizzy and disoriented. During this period, Antonio started smoking Mary Jane. Using Mary Jane was frowned upon by his grandparents. Antonio Franklin was informed by his uncle and grandfather on April 17, 1997, that he would soon have to find a place of his own. The conversation infuriated 19-year-old Franklin, who subsequently argued with his uncle. Franklin's uncle allegedly said something during the dispute that suggested Franklin had a sexual attraction to guys. In response, Franklin attacked his uncle with a baseball bat that was close by. After that, he assaulted his grandfather and grandma. All three were badly battered. Franklin then got a gun and killed his grandma by shooting her in the head. He set the home on fire after stealing his grandmother's jewels. He took his grandmother's car and escaped to Tennessee. The Tennessee police swiftly took him into custody. Franklin's clothes were smeared with blood, and he still had the gun. On April 19, 1997, at 1:53 a.m., a call was placed to the fire department. 3 bodies were discovered inside. Ophelia, Franklin's grandmother, passed away from blunt force trauma or a gunshot wound. Both his uncle Anthony and his grandfather Ivory passed away as a result of smoke inhalation and blunt force injuries. Franklin admitted to the crimes while being questioned by the police. He said they weren't treating me right in response to the question of why he carried out the killings. In addition, he claimed that at the age of 14, his uncle had essayed him. Derek Cook. In relation to Frank Shorter's death, he was convicted of aggravated murder, aggravated robbery, and kidnapping. Shorter, 68, was killed by Cook at an abandoned building on Cincinnati's Side Street. Shorter oversaw Sullivan's clothing store as its manager. Cook allegedly stole money and clothes from Sullivan's, abducted Shorter, led him to an abandoned building, robbed him, then shot him in the head at close range, according to the report. Cook demanded reward money for the murder weapon and called Shorter's wife and the police. Jeremy Cunningham. Cunningham and his half-brother, Cleveland Jackson, killed 3-year-old Jayla Grant and 17-year-old Lanisha Williams in a Lima residence on January 3, 2002. Cunningham and Jackson planned to rob a guy of his money and crack cocaine while Jayla, Lanisha, and 6 other individuals were at his home. Cunningham and Jackson shot everyone in the house after stealing jewelry, cash, and drugs. They shot Lanisha in the back of the head and shot Jayla twice in the head while her father was holding her. Jackson and Cunningham were also found guilty of attempting to kill the survivors, all of whom got hurt by gunshots. Jackson was also given the death penalty. Vaughn Davis. While on parole for the murder of his wife, he shot his ex-girlfriend, Suzette Butler, in 1983 and was found guilty of aggravated murder. After Suzette Butler left an American Legion post in Hamilton, Ohio, Davis shot her several times, including in the head. Archie Dixon. He was found guilty of killing Christopher Hammer, 22, on September 22, 1993, in Toledo, Ohio. Joel Drain. He was found guilty of killing inmate Christopher M. Richardson. Drain was already serving a sentence of 30 years to life in prison for aggravated murder, felonious assault, and theft in Hancock County. Stephen Sepek. For the murder of Frank Munz during an aggravated robbery, Sepek received a death sentence in Ohio. He used the lamp cord to strangle Munz after striking him with a hammer. Daval Chin. Chin received a death sentence after being found guilty of aggravated murder. The fact that he killed Brian Jones during a robbery led to his conviction. Curtis Clinton. In 2013, Clinton was put on trial for the 2012 murders of 23-year-old Heather Jackson and her two children, Wayne Jr., 18 months, and Selena, 3 years old. In addition to having already done 13 years in prison for the strangling murder of 18-year-old Misty Keckler in 1997, he also essayed and strangled a 17-year-old girl a week earlier. Clinton received a death sentence after being found guilty on all counts of aggravated murder, essay, and aggravated burglary. Timothy Coleman. He was found guilty of killing Melinda Stevens, a Springfield Police Department confidential informant, in 1996. Coleman admitted his crime to several individuals with whom he was held in jail and prison after his arrest, according to the prosecution. Douglas Coley. He was tried and found guilty of killing Elokdi Samar, a young woman in Toledo, Ohio, while committing an aggravated robbery. When the crimes were committed, Coley was just 20 years old. Terry Froman. He was found guilty of the abduction and killing of his former girlfriend and her son. Kimberly Thomas had recently requested Froman to leave her house in Mayfield, Kentucky, after they had been together for 4 years. He entered the house on September 12, 2014, shot and killed her 17-year-old son, and then took her hostage. On Ohio's Interstate 75, Froman shot her in his vehicle. Clarence Fry Jr. On July 31, 2005, when Tamila Hardison, 41, was watching her 3 grandchildren, Fry stabbed her 4 times. He told 2 of the young children that he was going to slice potatoes as he entered the house with a bowl and a butcher knife. Later, the kids fled to a neighbor and claimed that their grandmother had been slain by Fry. Tamila Hardison and Fry had been in a relationship. Larry Gapon. In the early hours of September 18, 2000, Gapon used a splitting axe to kill his ex-wife Martha Madewell, 37, her companion Nathan Marshall, 40, and Madewell's 13-year-old daughter Jessica Young at their home on Pleasant Hill Drive in Dayton. He struck Madewell and Marshall in the basement. Then, upstairs, he attacked Jessica in her bed, inflicting fatal injuries. Jerome Henderson. Henderson killed Mary Akoff, his neighbor, who was 26 years old. Akoff resisted her assailant and was repeatedly stabbed and battered before her 10-year-old daughter discovered her naked body when she got home. When Henderson broke into Mary's apartment, he tried to assay her, stabbed and beat her repeatedly in the head, chest, and neck, and cut her throat at least 13 times. Edward Lang. He was sentenced to death in Ohio for the aggravated murders of Jaron Burdett and Marnell Cheek, along with aggravated robbery and gun specifications. He received a death sentence for the murder of Cheek, life without parole for the murder of Burdett, and a prison sentence for aggravated robbery. Aaron Lawson. After his cousin ended an affair with him, Lawson confessed to killing her and 3 other family members. In October 2017, 1 week after Stacy Holston ended her relationship with Lawson, he broke into her home in the little town of Pedro, shot her 3 times, and then essayed her dead body. Then, posing as Stacy's husband, Lawson called her son's school to ensure that he came home from school rather than visiting his grandparents. Lawson shot the 8-year-old boy when he got home that afternoon. When he didn't hear from his wife, Stacy's husband, Todd Holston, became concerned and called her parents, Tammy and Donald McGuire, to go see how she was doing. Tammy broke into the house with Todd's consent and was shot dead by Lawson. Donald went to see how his wife was doing and was also shot dead. Lawson repeatedly stabbed Todd with a knife when he got home 10 to 20 minutes later. However, Todd managed to pull the weapon from Lawson's hand and threw him out of the house before discovering the bodies and calling 911. Todd brought along his other son, a 2-year-old who had slept through at least the first 3 killings after Lawson had put him to sleep following the murder of his mother. Carl Lindsay. Lindsay was sentenced to death for the 1997 murder of Donald Ray Whitey Hoop in a murder-for-hire plot orchestrated with the victim's wife, Joy Hoop. On the night of the killing, Lindsay accepted a firearm from Joy and later ambushed Whitey outside a bar in Mount Orab, Ohio, shooting him multiple times, including a fatal shot to the head. Witnesses saw Lindsay at the scene, and forensic evidence linked him directly to the crime, including blood-stained clothing and the murder weapon. The jury found him guilty of aggravated murder with death specifications, and he was sentenced to death due to the calculated and contract-based nature of the killing. Gregory Lott. He was convicted of murdering 82-year-old John McGrath during a robbery in his East Cleveland home on July 12, 1986. He tied up John, doused him with heating lamp oil, and set him on fire. Police discovered John on July 15, 1986, when they went to his home to check on him. John had been badly injured but was still alive. He did die on July 23, 1986. Jose Loza. Jose Trinidad Loza Ventura was sentenced to death after being convicted of the January 16, 1991 murders of 4 members of his girlfriend's family in Middletown, Ohio. He gunned down Georgia Davis, Gary Mullins, Cheryl Centeno, and Jerry Luana Jackson, who was 6 months pregnant, as they slept, shooting each victim in the head at close range. Clarence Mack. He was sentenced to death after being convicted of the January 21, 1991 aggravated murder of Cleveland businessman Peter Sanelli during a carjacking. Mack and accomplices confronted Sanelli as he left his glass and mirror business, forcibly taking his vehicle and fatally shooting him 3 times at close range. Witness testimony, including an accomplice's confession, plus forensic evidence such as spent shell casings and ballistics linking Mack's gun to the crime, established his guilt. The jury unanimously recommended the death penalty, which the trial court imposed and was later affirmed on appeal by the Ohio Supreme Court. Joseph McAlpin. He was sentenced to death for the brutal April 2017 murders of Michael Kuznick and Trina Tomola Kuznick during a planned robbery at their Mr. Carr's dealership in Cleveland. McAlpin disguised himself, entered the business armed, and shot both victims and their dog execution style in the head. Surveillance video and DNA evidence and testimony from a co-defendant tied McAlpin directly to the crime. Despite representing himself at trial, the jury convicted him of aggravated murder and accompanying capital specifications, and swiftly recommended the death penalty, which the judge upheld. The Supreme Court of Ohio later unanimously affirmed his death sentence. Calvin McKelton. He was sentenced to death for the calculated 2009 killing of Jermaine Mick Evans, whom he executed to prevent him from testifying about the 2008 strangulation of his girlfriend, defense attorney Margaret Allen. Evidence included his admission to informants, witness testimony, and the jury finding that Evans was murdered to obstruct justice. The jury unanimously recommended death, which a judge imposed and the Ohio Supreme Court later upheld. David Myers. He was sentenced to death following his conviction in February 1996 for the aggravated murder of 18-year-old Amanda Maher. In the early morning of August 4, 1988, she was found near railroad tracks in Xenia, Ohio, with a spike driven through her temple and strangulation marks. Myers was the last person seen with her and was later found in possession of her belongings. A jury found him guilty of aggravated murder, and the court imposed the death penalty based on the premeditated and violent nature of the crime. Amanda was also a mother to an 8-month-old baby. Calvin Nayland. He is on Ohio's death row for the August 8, 2007 slaying of Liberty Transportation in Perrysburg Township, Ohio. After being informed he was being fired, Nayland ambushed and fatally shot branch manager Douglas Smith execution-style in the head, and safety director Thomas Lazar shot multiple times in the back on company premises. Investigators recovered shell casings at the scene, and his getaway vehicle led police to arrest him days later in Michigan. Matthew Nicholson. He was sentenced to death for the September 2018 murders of his girlfriend's teenage children, 19-year-old Giselle Lopez and her 17-year-old brother, in Garfield Heights, Ohio. After a violent argument at home, Nicholson went to his car, retrieved a gun, and returned to shoot both teens multiple times in the back as they stood in the driveway. Surveillance evidence and his own admission during a standoff with police contradicted his claims of a blackout or self-defense. The jury found him guilty of 2 counts of aggravated murder with death penalty specifications for prior calculation and design, following which they unanimously recommended the death sentence. The Ohio Supreme Court affirmed the convictions and death sentence in February 2024. Tyrone Knowling. He is on Ohio's death row for the 1990 double homicide of Bernhard and Cora Harting in Atwater, Ohio. The couple, both 81 years old, were found shot to death in their home and the crime was initially unsolved. Knowling, then 18, was later convicted based on the testimony of 3 associates who claimed he participated in the murders. These individuals received plea deals or immunity in exchange for their cooperation. However, Knowling maintains his innocence and several key issues have cast doubt on the conviction. Notably, the murder weapon was never found and Knowling volunteered for and passed a polygraph test. Ballistics tests revealed that a .25 caliber pistol he had stolen during a robbery was not the murder weapon. Additionally, fingerprints found at the crime scene did not match Knowling or his alleged co-conspirators. Some of the witnesses who testified against him have since recanted, claiming they were coerced by law enforcement. Despite these developments, Knowling's requests for DNA testing on evidence from the crime scene have been denied, and his appeals for a new trial have been unsuccessful. Denny Obermiller. On August 10, 2010, Obermiller, then 23, killed his 60-year-old grandfather and 61-year-old grandmother in their home. The victims were found strangled to death and the crime scene was staged to destroy evidence. Gas burners were left on and candles were burning. Obermiller was arrested days later in Licking County, Ohio, and reportedly confessed to the killings without being read his Miranda rights. In 2011, Obermiller pleaded guilty to 17 violent crimes, including aggravated murder, essay, and kidnapping. A 3-judge panel in Cuyahoga County unanimously sentenced him to death for the aggravated murders and imposed concurrent prison terms for the other offenses. James O'Neill. He is on Ohio's death row for the 1993 murder of his wife, Carol O'Neill, in Hamilton County. According to court documents, after Carol expelled James and his sons from her home, James admitted to officers that he broke into the house, followed her upstairs to the bedroom, and shot her to teach her a lesson. He was convicted of aggravated murder and aggravated burglary, and for attempting to murder Carol's son Ricardo, who was present during the incident. Gregory Ossie. He is on death row for the February 14, 2009 murder of David Williams, a business partner in a contracting company. He fatally stabbed Williams in Williams's home, and the crime was committed to prevent Williams from reporting missing money allegedly stolen by Ossie's girlfriend from the business. Kerry Perez. He is on Ohio's death row for the March 2003 aggravated murder of Ronald Johnson, the owner of a bar in Springfield, Ohio. Perez entered the bar with an accomplice intending to rob it. During said robbery, he shot Johnson once in the back, killing him. Perez was convicted of aggravated murder and sentenced to death. The Ohio Supreme Court upheld the conviction and sentence in December 2009, affirming the use of jailhouse recordings of Perez's conversations with his wife as evidence in the trial. Mark Pickens. He is on Ohio's death row for the 2009 aggravated murders of his ex-girlfriend Noelle Washington, her 9-month-old son, and the 3-year-old child she was babysitting. The crimes occurred in Cincinnati, Ohio, and were committed after Washington reported to police that Pickens had essayed her. The following night, Pickens entered her apartment and fatally shot all 3 victims. He was convicted in 2010 and sentenced to death by a jury. Wayne Powell. On November 11, 2006, Powell set fire to a home, resulting in the deaths of Mary McCollum, her 4-year-old adopted son Jamal McCollum Myers, her 52-year-old mother Rosemary McCollum, and 2-year-old Santa Thomas, a cousin visiting for the night. The fire was intentionally set using gasoline poured through a crack in the door. Walter Raglan. Raglan is on Ohio's death row for the 1995 murder and robbery of Michael Banney in Cincinnati. Raglan was convicted of aggravated murder and aggravated robbery, with the jury recommending a death sentence. The Ohio Supreme Court upheld his conviction and sentence in 1998. Raglan's legal team has raised several issues on appeal, including claims of ineffective assistance of trial counsel. Notably, Raglan's attorneys conceded his guilt during voir dire and opening statements, but later argued for acquittal during closure arguments, which has been a central point in his appeals. Michael Scott. Michael Dean Scott is on Ohio's death row for the 2001 murders of Dallas Green and Ryan Stouffer in Stark County. Scott was convicted of aggravated murder, aggravated robbery, kidnapping, and firearm specifications. The Ohio Supreme Court upheld his conviction and death sentence in 2004. The case involved Scott's implication in two separate killings. Dallas Green was shot after a brief exchange of words, and Ryan Stouffer was killed during a vehicle theft. Scott's confession and ballistic evidence linked him to both crimes. During the penalty phase, the defense presented evidence of Scott's traumatic childhood, including physical abuse and neglect, which contributed to his psychological issues. Despite this, the jury recommended the death penalty, and the judge imposed the sentence. James Weir. Also known as Namir Abdul Mateen, he is on death row for his involvement in the 1993 Lucasville prison riot at the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility in Lucasville. During the 11-day uprising, Weir participated in the killings of correctional officer Robert Vallandigham and inmate David Sommers. The riot resulted in the deaths of a total of 9 individuals, including 7 inmates and 2 correctional officers. The incident was one of the most violent prison uprisings in U.S. history. Clifford Williams. He is on Ohio's death row for the 1990 murder of taxi driver Wayman Hamilton in Ohio. At the time of the crime, Williams was 18 years old. On the night of August 3, 1990, he hailed a taxi, shot Hamilton in the forehead, and stole his money. Hamilton was airlifted to a hospital but was later pronounced dead. A .25 caliber bullet was recovered from Hamilton's head, and Williams was arrested shortly after the incident. Martin Rojas. He is on death row for the 1992 murder of Rebecca Becky Scott in Hamilton County. On May 14, 1987, Rojas forcibly entered Scott's apartment, stabbed her in the back, and essayed her. Before leaving, he set the apartment on fire by spreading paint-stripping gel and opening a gas valve, causing an explosion. He also stole $25 from Scott's purse. Marvin Johnson. He brutally killed his then-girlfriend's 13-year-old son, Daniel Bailey, by beating him to death, gagging and binding him, and hiding his body in the basement. Afterwards, he kidnapped and essayed the boy's mother, Tina Bailey, at knife point, forced her to withdraw $1,000 at a bank, and then fled. Johnson was convicted on 2 counts of aggravated murder, one for the premeditated killing of Daniel, and another under felony murder provisions, along with kidnapping, essay, and aggravated robbery. The prosecution presented powerful evidence, including blood spatter matching Daniel's DNA and testimony detailing the kidnapping and assault. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.